Welcome to Sino-Warfare with Ralph D. Sawyer. Today we come to the often perplexing subject of Qi and Zheng, or the unorthodox and orthodox, as I believe they should be translated. The combination always appears in that order rather than orthodox and unorthodox, as commonly phrased in the West. It's a sequence that inherently contrasts the unorthodox with convention and normality. Initially articulated in The Art of War, the concept and martial applications of the unorthodox play a critical role in warring states' thought, especially Swinbean's military methods, the Six Secret Teachings, and the Wei Liaozi. In all three, the implementation of unorthodox measures is always regarded as a fundamental option, both strategically and tactically. Thereafter, important military writings such as the Tang Dynasty Questions and Replies continue to devote considerable space to discussing its potential and its employment. It's such a vital concept that I wrote an entire book about it, The Tao of Deception, Unorthodox Warfare in Historic and Modern China. Chinese interest in the subject remains so significant, my book's even been translated back into Chinese. Qi Di. Before delving into the text, we might consider some of the ways in which Qi and Zheng have been translated in order to gain a sense of the concept. According to the commonly used dictionaries, Zheng has a core meaning of being correct, upright, regular, straight, straightforward, maybe principled, and the upper side of something. In deliberate contrast, Qi refers to the unusual, the strange, the rare, marvelous, odd, and the obverse side. Not by accident, it also appears as an element in other characters with a similar pronunciation, such as for rare jewels, and for leaning, for crippled, and for precipitous, or a path over the mountains. As an element in compound characters, Zheng appears in the important military term zheng, which means to rectify by military means, as well as attack, subjugate, and raise troops. It also forms part of the character for govern or administer, also pronounced zheng. And another that means put in order. Depending upon their understanding of the concept, over the last century, translators have employed paired terms such as crafty and straightforward, indirect and direct, extraordinary and normal, as well as irregular and regular, although that probably isn't a good choice in view of contemporary military thought. Although they vary in their explanations, the more astute envision forces operating in a zheng mode, engaging the enemy on the battlefield in the normal manner, and those assigned a Qi role, implementing unusual tactics, such as attacking from the flank or rear. The tactical implications pervade the entire art of war, but the critical passages are found solely in one chapter, Strategic Military Power. If we abstract the crux and rearrange the word order, we have: in general, in battle one engages with the orthodox and gains victory through the unorthodox. The unorthodox and orthodox enable the masses of the three armies to invariably withstand the enemy without being defeated. In warfare, the strategic configurations of power do not exceed the unorthodox and orthodox, but the changes of the unorthodox and orthodox can never be completely exhausted. The unorthodox and orthodox mutually produce each other, just like an endless cycle. Who can exhaust them? Although the meaning seems clear, the question of what constitutes the unorthodox and orthodox has long plagued the passage's interpretation. In a world in which defeat doomed commanders to horrendous punishment, including death, any use of non-standard tactics would doubly justify their condemnation. Nevertheless, Sunzi formulated the concept of the unorthodox after contemplating the factors and dynamics that could bring about victory in ordinary encounters and hopefully preserve the army in difficult situations. It's a revolutionary insight, one that would quickly be adopted by commanders who found themselves outnumbered, exhausted, or in disadvantageous positions where ordinary tactical methods would be futile. However, unorthodox measures aren't restricted to them. Texts don't exist in a vacuum, as we've discussed before, but are instead created in response to contemporary thinking and frequently encountered situations, especially dire ones. In most human activities, a body of common knowledge develops that is presumably, but not necessarily, based upon identifying what works and what doesn't. This was especially true for warfare, an endeavor in which life and death hang in the balance. However, military science also tends to be conservative and self-reinforcing, constricted and unimaginative. Conventional thought, unchallenged assumptions, prescriptive tactics weren't just consciously adopted again and again, but they subconsciously affected the interpretation and perspective of commanders, precluding alternative approaches. In the art of war, Qi and Zheng are defined within this context. In essence, in my opinion, Zheng is synonymous with conventional measures, Qi, the unorthodox, with unconventional ones. Zheng, or orthodox tactics, include employing troops in normal, conventional, by the book, and therefore predictable ways, such as launching massive frontal assaults while stressing order and deliberate movement. In contrast, Qi, or unorthodox tactics, are primarily realized through employing forces, especially flexible ones, in imaginative, unconventional, unexpected ways. Instead of direct charge attacks, circular or flanking thrusts would be unorthodox, whether undertaken as a sole measure or in conjunction with orthodox measures intended to fix the enemy or lure them into complacency. Instead of frontal assaults, they follow indirect routes to stage unexpected, behind-the-line forays. Moreover, in any given situation, the alternatives are multiple, not singular or simply A, B, either or. In other words, when two armies confront each other, if the red force occupies a decidedly advantageous position, or outnumbers the blue, and thus enjoys the sort of localized tactical imbalance of power that Sunzi discusses as chuan, the conventional tactic would be for the inferior blue force to retreat, to conserve their strength for another day. This is a measure the art of war, of course, advocates. However, the unorthodox tactic is attacking rather than retreating, thereby doing the unexpected, not to mention what most people would regard as stupid and foolish. Success might be ensured beforehand by implementing measures intended to deceive and manipulate the enemy, such as enticing them into being negligent by appearing exhausted, spreading rumors of illness and weakness, or feigning disorder. However, as the history of Chinese warfare shows, there are always other unorthodox possibilities, some of which were already being sporadically seen in the spring and autumn period. For example, if the blue army decides to adopt an attritional strategy, it can fortify its defenses, ensconce itself behind massive fortifications, and refuse to engage in battle while constantly harassing the enemy and sending elite units out to sever their supply lines. It can employ nighttime raids to cause chaos and slay men, dispatch a band of forces out behind the enemy who then set out dummies and raise a clamor, frightening the Red Army into thinking a large force has maneuvered behind them. It can launch incendiary attacks that will, as Sunzi says, burn men and supplies, and even poison or cut off the water supply. It can feign retreating after deploying forces in ambush, thereby drawing the enemy forward before turning about and striking from both flanks, even as the front mounts a stout resistance or initiates a fervent attack. Or simplest of all, the commander can pretend he wants to surrender, then exploit the ensuing laxity. Another of the possibilities I discuss in my book, Lever of Power, Military Deception in China and the West. Qi and Zheng's possibilities in any given situation thus depend upon normal expectation within the battlefield circumstances. However, being interdependent and intertwined, Qi and Zheng are mutually transforming and circular in possibility. But as alternative tactics such as feign retreats are increasingly employed and become common, they in turn become orthodox. At that point, what was originally orthodox, undertaking a real withdrawal, becomes unorthodox. This explains why the unorthodox and the orthodox can be conceived as an endless cycle, as well as Sunzi's use of repeating phenomena as analogies. The unorthodox and its relationship to the orthodox have often been misunderstood, not just by Western commentators who tend not to study its implementation and transformation across the centuries, but also Chinese commanders and even military writers. On the one hand, it lends itself to extreme complexities of thought that can impede realistic strategic analysis. On the other hand, it's been dismissed as simplistic, reduced to merely doing the opposite of what's expected. The Chinese secondary literature on Sunzi is overwhelming. However, when it comes to Qi and Zheng, analysts tend to mindlessly repeat the definitions found in The Art of War and the later military writings, then go on to focus on how these abstract concepts are realized on the battlefield with concrete forces. Flexibility, maneuverability, and swiftness are especially stressed when discussing the unorthodox, although they should equally characterize all military forces in Sunzi's view. Ultimately, there's nothing mysterious or mystical about Qi and Zheng. They are basically descriptive tools for tactical conceptualization, for characterizing and manipulating forces within a matrix of expectation, rather than some sort of transformational modality that's actualized the way military formations are deployed and manipulated. Finally, although The Art of War initiates the martial discussion of the unorthodox, it's unclear whether the concept originated with Sunzi or it pre-existed, and his great contribution lies in realizing that it can be applied in the military realm. It may have had its roots in the trend of naturalistic thought that came to be known as Taoism from its founding work, the Tao Te Ching, a book that probably reached final form a century or two after The Art of War. Reversal characterizes natural phenomena in the Tao Te Ching, so things in dynamic tension revert to their complements after they reach a pinnacle. Zheng, the orthodox, thus turns into Qi, the unorthodox, and Qi back into Zheng, just as yin and yang, or day and night, echoing Sunzi. Moreover, military affairs are generally regarded as Qi, unorthodox, in accord with the dictum, with the orthodox govern the state, with the unorthodox employ the army. Accordingly, Wang Zhen, an experienced Tang Dynasty military commander who was profoundly disturbed by the carnage about him, employed the Tao Te Ching to write a meditation about ending warfare, which I've translated as the Tao of War. As always, thanks for watching.